This episode of Trifles is made possible by listeners like you who support us on Patreon and Substack. To learn more, go to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the problem was final, the house was empty, and his bow was last, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Why would the Pope engage Sherlock Holmes' services? Why did he receive the Legion of Honor from France? And why would he refuse a knighthood?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 405, Something to Show for It. Hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we get into the details in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, what do you have to show for yourself today?
What do I have to show for myself today?
What do you have to say for yourself?
What do I have to say for myself? I think, here I am, world, take me as I am because I'm the only me there is and I can't do anything about it.
Oh.
The problem is that people can't really change all that much during the course of their lives, It's very rare you find someone who really turns things upside down.
Well,
so I can
sure
become a little kinder, more thoughtful. Everybody can, but other than that, I'm still the goofy old idiot that I was when I was
come on.
15 years old.
It's not that hard. I changed this morning out of my pajamas into my street clothes. Here we are.
Why is it I can't tell the difference? Can you get closer to the camera? What?
It's upside down. This is part of the problem.
Your street clothes are just as wrinkled as your pajamas. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was looking at my own skin. I didn't mean to do that.
Well, we are delighted to be here with you again here on Trifles. We are going to look at, this is one of those episodes where we look across the entire canon. We're looking at things that were left behind or physical clues, things that we can touch and feel, and that bring some kind of realism to the Sherlock Holmes stories. I think it's going to be a fascinating one. If you would like to make sure you get all of these episodes, subscribe to us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. We have a link there in the show notes, so you can choose the podcast player that you prefer. And of course, sign up for email updates on Substack, Patreon, or at SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. We don't care where. Just sign up where it makes the most sense for you and let us come right into your ears with our Sherlockian discussion. And of course, when you are on Patreon and Substack and supporting us financially for the amount that you deem appropriate, we do have bonus material there. We have extra things, outtakes and flubs and whatnot. We have extra conversation. And then we also make sure that every month, at the end of every month, all of our subscribers and supporters are entered into a drawing for a free back issue of the Baker Street Journal. So your chance to get free stuff from us. And also, should just add this in, if you have an idea for the show and we use it on the air, we will also send you free stuff. What more do you need? Okay, something to show for it. This is one of those ideas I think I jotted down just in a kind of a fever dream at some point. And I'm not sure exactly where I was going with it, but I happened to realize that there were certain stories where Holmes or Watson or their client, they were touching something. There was something that they show. It's almost like a show and tell for the canon. So Where should we jump into this very fertile topic?
Well, I think that we should just describe in a little bit more detail the focus here. You know, when you have a topic like this about objects, sometimes you can confuse that with the MacGuffin, which is the idea that Hitchcock promoted. I don't think it was his original idea, but, you know, a plot device that's really the goal for the characters, things like the Maltese Falcon, you know, that really describes objects that drive a whole story forward and provide a path and a pursuit and things like that. That's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about, as you pointed out, physical clues, the things that pop up that are really important to Holmes and Watson. And a good place to jump in there is sign of 4, because we've got a couple of very important physical clues. You know, I can think of the 2 big ones off the top of my head.
Yes.
But
yes.
one is certainly the pearls. The pearls that Mary Morstan has been mysteriously receiving at regular intervals, which are one of the objects that she brings to Baker Street when we first meet her.
And to me, that's a real good one because, you know, she shows up and of course she was already just arresting in terms of her physicality. Watson was very taken by her. But she talked about this annual gift that she received in the post, and as if to give her story credence, she opened a flat box as she spoke. She showed me 6 of the finest pearls I had ever seen. Right. So having that kind of first eyewitness account there saying, okay, it's not just someone making something up and coming to us with a tale. She physically brought the evidence of the last 6 years that she has been accumulating.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, it's the kind of mysterious object that sets people thinking, and it certainly sets Sherlock Holmes thinking. And the other thing that she brings to the object is that map, that piece of folded paper that goes back to her father with the peculiar markings on it and the words, sign of 4.
Definitely an indelible kind of physical remnant there. Well, if we think about jewels, certainly let's stick with this. I think there are a couple of other ones in these early stories that also sprung out. One, obviously, the blue carbuncle. The story itself is named for this gem, and of course, when Peterson blusters back into the room after having taken that lost goose home, he said, my wife was cleaning it out, and you'll never guess what she found in its crop. And he holds up the blue carbuncle. And, this, of course, is the stone at the center of a mystery that Scotland Yard is trying to solve, the missing jewel from the Countess of Morcar's hotel room. And here it appears in Baker Street in the flesh, or I guess in the carbon form.
Yeah, and it's a lovely thing, you know, and it's nice to pause and remember that these objects have really stimulated Sherlockians to do fascinating and interesting things. And in fact, just about 3 years ago, on our other show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, or actually on the website, I think we did it as an episode, didn't we? About evidence boxes. Our friend, the late Paul Churchill, delighted in creating evidence boxes for each Sherlock Holmes story with these little objects actually presented and preserved. And some of them were astounding, you know, in their detail.
Yeah, that was Deborah Clark that joined us on episode 225.
Oh, well remembered. Yeah, that's great. And so you've got some of these things like the blue carbuncle and the pearl. And in Copper Beeches, there's an unusual one, which is what Violet Hunter finds as she finally jimmies open a drawer in her room at the Copper Beeches. She finds a length of hair quite like her own length of hair that she's just shorn to meet the requirements of Jeffro Rucastle and his wife. And of course, the other great object, which would be difficult to put in an evidence box, I think the hair would also be a little difficult. But you could put, I suppose, a little snip of
lock of hair at least.
But a lock of hair. But the other object, of course, is
dress.
the electric blue dress. Violet would have to be pretty dim if she didn't say, wait a second, this hair looks like mine and this dress fits me perfectly. What's going on here?
Oh, goodness. Now, help me with my recollection here, because as we're thinking about talking about jewels, another one of the stories named after a jewel, the beryl coronet. Did the beryl coronet ever make its way to Baker Street? Did Holmes and Watson see it in the flesh? Or not in the flesh, but in person?
Well, I think so, yeah, because there's that scene where Holmes points out to Alexander Holder that if the sound and the noise that would be created by breaking it off. So I'm pretty sure it was actually in Holmes's hands, but other than that, I don't remember. I remember that scene, but I haven't read Beryl Coronet in a while.
Well, Holmes certainly had to investigate the physical coronet to see the way that it was rended apart. I remember Alexander Holder being obviously hesitant to take that kind of collateral from his client. And this is probably a topic for another trifle. I don't recall if we've actually covered this, but why wouldn't he have kept the beryl coronet in the bank, in a vault or a safety deposit box, rather than taking it home and locking it in his dresser?
I think there was some reason about the timing, wasn't there? I mean, there was some vague excuse, but I don't remember, as I say.
Yeah, we'll have to go back and maybe explore that as its own standalone. This becomes another one of those plot holes like we just discussed with A Scandal in Bohemia.
Right. Well, think how brief the story would be if he took it. It would be really hardly a paragraph. If he did the responsible thing.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's other interesting forms and things that point the way. And one is in the case of identity, when we've got the evidence. I think it's one of the earliest appearances in literature of the unique fingerprint, if you will, that a set of typewriter keys can produce on paper in terms of the alignment of the various characters. And it's the fact that the letters are typed in the first place, but also, the ability to associate that with a particular machine is important to Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. Definitely, he was able to deduce things about who was writing those letters. Similarly, in terms of someone who was writing, we have the mysterious code of the dancing men. These were, in some cases, left in chalk or scrawled on the side of a wall or whatnot. And Hilton Cubitt copied them down, but he didn't necessarily retain all of them. He had, I think it was the stable boy, the groom, wash them away. But he did bring these messages to Holmes himself. So Holmes is in receipt of these scrawlings, these little dancing men, and trying to make sense of them, and having evidence of this communication helped him to not only break the code but determine what was coming next, albeit a little too late for this client.
Oh, yeah. one of the great failures, sadly, of Sherlock Holmes is not acting more quickly to prevent the death of Hilton Cubitt. Poor old Hilton. And then, of course, the 5 orange pips, or pits.
Speaking of failures.
Speaking of failures, those poor Openshaws, they were just dropping like flies. But
fruit flies.
Dropping like fruit flies. There again, something very unusual. You don't expect to get that in the mail, to have the pips put upon you in the mail. Very alarming.
Yeah, and again, any client could have told a story about this in Baker Street, but the added drama of someone showing up with those 5 orange pips and presenting them, it brings so much more an urgency and reality to the particular problem at hand. And, if you're going to have a problem at hand, what about missing your thumb? The engineer's thumb. There is no better evidence than, I'm a victim of a certain crime and showing up with one of your digits hacked off. This certainly gave credence to Victor Hatherley's tale of having been out in Eisford and being the victim of, who was it, Lysander Stark, or no, Colonel. Was it Colonel Starr?
Yeah.
Lysander Starr.
Right. Yeah. Well, very sad. Victor Hatherley's hitchhiking days are past now.
Well, they have passed.
Have passed. Yeah. Well, and then, of course, one of the wonderful, really dramatic early examples of an object, something that you could to show for it, is in the Musgrave Ritual, when, in search of the missing maid, Rachel Howells, Musgrave has dragged the mere and turned up not a body, but a linen bag with some bent and twisted metal and some pebbles. Don't seem to mean anything until Holmes rubs one on his sleeve and it glows brightly in his hand. And that's how we realize that what we've got here is the lost crown of the ancient kings of England, the crown of Charles I.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the most fascinating things that turned from basically a pile of junk into what could be one of the most heralded clues in the Sherlockian canon, a connection to the ancient crown of England. A crumpled piece of paper, an old-fashioned brass key, a peg of wood with a ball of string, and 3 rusty old discs of metal. That's what was in Holmes's strongbox there, as he shared it with Watson in the early part of that story. Speaking of fragments left behind, in the Reigate Squire, of course, we had this note that was left behind. And this is interesting because it's similar in some ways to what we saw earlier in a case of identity. In that case, there was the linking of these 2 disparate individuals to a single typewriter. Well, in this case, we have a single note with 2 types of handwriting on it. And Holmes recognized very clearly that I think every alternate word was in a different person's handwriting. And he was able to deduce that the father and son there, blanking on their names, and the Reigate Squire.
Oh.
Alec and Cunningham, the Cunninghams.
Oh, right.
That they conspired together to concoct this plan that there was a robbery for the sake of, their own benefit. And Holmes used that analysis of handwriting to determine that they were both involved. And that, of course, leads directly to the next case that we were going to talk about. And I love these segues.
It is a good segue. Well, that's the Norwood Builder. And this is the great case where Holmes and Watson are visited by poor old John Hector McFarlane. He's a young lawyer from Blackheath, and he's been accused of murdering one of his clients, the builder Jonas Oldacre. And what happens to McFarlane is Oldacre has come to his office just the day before and asked him to draw up his will. And guess what? You, Jonas, are going to be the sole beneficiary for, reasons that I will make up on the spot. And amazingly, the next morning after McFarlane leaves, he finds that poor old Oldacre has apparently been murdered and the police are looking for him. So there's the will, the will which stands out, providing what seems to be a damning motive.
Yeah, and I loved how Holmes said that, with an expert's analysis, you could actually determine the railroad line that the person rode on. And I'm sure, if he sat down with a timetable, he could have worked it all out.
Yeah, I thought that was very clever, too.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking
it just goes to show you, when there's a will, there's a way. Sorry. Yeah.
Bring us home. Well, that takes us to, one of the most weird objects in the cases of Sherlock Holmes, the cardboard box, which includes, unfortunately, human ears.
Mm.
And that's not something you get in the mail every day.
No. They should have packed it up with the engineer's thumb.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But, body parts.
Yeah, very strange.
And we could keep going on here, but let's just finish with one more, because this is a fascinating one. In the Three Students, there's a few things. There's the ball of quote unquote dough that they find on the desk, and of course the physical scrapes in the leather top of the desk. But there's also the pencil shavings that are there. And Holmes is able to put these disparate clues together, these physical clues, to determine exactly what was happening with respect to the three students and who might be the most likely suspect there. So,
it's one of Holmes's most interesting deductions that many people, including us, have developed some skepticism about, because he's able to announce to his somewhat nonplussed audience that what they need to be looking for is a blue Johann Faber pencil that's about an inch long. Find that, and you've found your man. And it would be hard to imagine someone not saying, "Let me see if I understand this, Mr. Holmes. You want me to find a bit of a pencil 1 inch long in this university town? Yeah,
yes.
Hold on while I look around for it."
A true needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
Well, these are, again, just a smattering of physical clues that show exactly what was going on in these stories. Maybe you have a favorite, one that we didn't discuss, one in some of the later stories, ones perhaps that we glossed over. Let us know. Email us at trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. What's your favorite Sherlockian clue, the physical clue that showed up in the stories? And perhaps if we get enough entries, we can dedicate a second episode to this, because there are no lack, certainly, of physical clues in the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Or no lack of trifles.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
It's a bonny thing. Just see how it glints and sparkles.
Of course, it is a nucleus and focus of crime. Every good stone is. They are the devil's pet baits.